From the Hebrew Bible, from the book of Ruth, the 2nd chapter, the 10th and 12th verse. Then she fell prostrate with her face to the ground and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your sight, that you should take notice of me when I am a foreigner?" But Boaz answered her, "All that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me. How you left your father and your mother and your native land to come to a people that you did not know before. May the Lord reward you for your deeds, and may you have a full reward from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge." Our gospel lesson this morning comes to us from the Gospel of Luke, the 19th chapter, the 5th through the 10th verse. I invite us to stand as we are willing and able to do so in body and in spirit. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to them, "Zacchaeus, hurry up and come down, for I must stay at your house today." So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He has gone to the guest of one who is a sinner?" Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek out and save the lost." These are the words of God, the people of God. Thanks be to God.
When was it you realized that you had intrinsic value? That your value does not depend on what you earn, that your value doesn't even depend on who loves you and who you love, that your value doesn't depend on anything from outside of yourselves, but that intrinsic value comes to us from being beloved children created by God. When was it you learned that, or have you forgotten it? I would tell you that you knew it at the beginning. You knew it before you knew it. God kind of calls that, or we call that as United Methodists, prevenient grace. God's love for us before we can do anything but cry and eat and the other stuff. And you know how we know we have intrinsic value at that point? Because other people take care of us before we've done a thing for them. They feed us, they clothe us, they give us shelter and protection, and certainly sometimes that is more challenging than others, depending on where and when you are born. But in the immediacy and in those moments when we can do nothing for ourselves, we have so much value that people are willing to get up in the middle of the night every few hours to feed us. That when they hear us cry and we can't speak for ourselves, they try diligently to figure out if there's something wrong. And if we need to call the pediatrician at 1 o'clock in the morning who says, "No, she just needs to burp, really, it's okay." We know we have intrinsic value. When does it happen that we start losing that knowledge or that awareness? When we start into the world and begin realizing people compare. They compare us to themselves, they compare us to others, and we begin doing the same thing. And we begin to evaluate ourselves, given the images that we see of something that the world tells us is more perfect than who we are currently. And we begin to lose that sense of intrinsic value. As Anne Lamott says at the very beginning of this particular chapter, there is nothing outside of ourselves that we can obtain that will give us serenity. Nothing outside of ourselves that will provide for us the kind of peace that passes all understanding. And that as soon as we realize that, we also have to realize that we cannot, even for the people we love the most, we cannot provide or make them have gifts of serenity or peace. And that's the big blow, isn't it? I can know that the decisions I've made in my life have not all been perfect, and that's fine, but I have all the right answers for the people I love the most. And I know, and it's so frustrating when they won't receive my answers with great celebration. So we, in the midst of our lives, we begin to say, how do we find a way to receive value from within? How do we begin to ask ourselves, where is God leading us in the midst of not only finding value for ourselves, because it's just the same as in order to love our neighbors, we have to love ourselves. In order to value our neighbors, we have to learn to value ourselves. And so we have Ruth and Zacchaeus this morning. They are not two paragons of virtue. They are not two people that the world looks at and says, oh, they're who I want to be like. They're people of value. You remember with me Ruth's story. Ruth was a Moabite, and she married an Israelite. And they were in her own homeland, in Ruth's homeland, and her sister-in-law Orpah married an Israelite, and their mother-in-law Naomi was an Israelite. Well, all of their husbands die. And Naomi says, the best you can probably hope for is to return to your father's family and see if they will take you back as widows. And you are young enough, perhaps you will marry again. And Orpah says, yes, that's what I think I will do. And Ruth says, no. And we have those famous lines. Whither thou goest, I will go. Wherever thou lodgest, I will lodge. Thy people shall be my people. Thy God shall be my God. May the Lord do thus and even more to me, if even death parts me from you. They are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lines of poetry that remind us of the commitment. And I wonder, does Ruth make that commitment out of a place of insecurity? Does she make that commitment out of a sense of desperation? We don't know that. Maybe she makes that decision out of a place of peace in her life, knowing that it isn't anything outside of her that's going to give her a fulfillment or a satisfaction now that her husband has passed. But in fact, maybe it's the ability to be with her mother-in-law and to decide that her mother-in-law is her family of choice. Her mother-in-law is the family that she wants to offer her life for. And the rest of the world looks at that and says, who in the world would make such a decision to leave everything they've known? Because Naomi says, the only place I have to go is back to my people and my country. And Ruth says, I'll go. And we would look at that decision and wonder, what does it mean to be able to make that choice that the world would look at as very odd? And then there's Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus, born into the Jewish people, the chosen people. Zacchaeus, who becomes an arm of the Roman Empire that gives him a position and a power because you see he's small of stature. And perhaps that position and the ability to make money, but you know how he made money? He had to give Rome what they required of the taxes of his area, but then anything he could collect above that was his. And he became wealthy on the backs of other people's taxes. So no, he was not beloved. And it should have been enough, shouldn't it? We have determined, the world has determined that by definition, if you get paid $500 million to play football, you've got to be happy every day and moment of your life. Or if you're worth however many billion, or that you can build spaceships, surely that will make you happy. Surely if you have that amount of money, building yourself a spaceship and flying around for a few minutes so that you don't have any gravitational pull, that is the definition of fulfillment and happiness. I may try to send this sermon to Jeff Bezos and see what happens. I don't know. Or the guy that owns Virgin Air, maybe. I've wondered if they aren't the Zacchaeus of our day. But you see, Zacchaeus evidently didn't have everything that would give him a sense of value, because he hears Jesus is coming, and because he can't get through the crowd to see him, he wants so desperately to see him that as a wealthy man of great position, he climbs a tree as an adult person. I would not advise most of you to do that. He climbs a tree to catch a glimpse of something he doesn't have, to see something of value that may give him or at least point him toward what might be value, because there's still something missing. Is there still something missing in our lives? Even though we have maybe the job we've dreamed of, or is it the fact that we don't have the job we ever dreamed of and that's why we're not happy? Is it because we don't have the relationship we always dreamed of and that's why we're not happy? Is it because we don't have the right car or the right house or the right clothes or the right body shape or the right age. Zacchaeus climbs that tree, and Jesus is walking by, and he stops underneath the tree. The one who sees our value beyond what the world sees stops underneath the tree where Zacchaeus is and looks at him and says, Zacchaeus, you come down, for I must go to your house today for dinner. And all of the people who looked right and acted right and didn't cheat other people out of money, all those people began to grumble. Why would Jesus pay attention to one who has such little value in our eyes? Why would Jesus pay such attention to you and to me? Do we grumble? He's cheated and extorted money from us. And Zacchaeus says, in the moment when Jesus says, I have to come to your house, Zacchaeus says, you know what? Half of everything I have, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, yes, you have. If I've defrauded anyone of anything, I'll pay them back 4 times as much. In that moment, did he suddenly understand what had been missing in his life? Someone who simply valued him because he was alive, because he was a creature of God, because he could breathe in and out. What would it be like in our lives if we had the kind of peace that allowed us to know we're valuable simply by being? Because we're children of God, made in God's image. That's what the book says, and we say we believe it. Are we allowing the world to define for us what value is and means? Have we decided that because we don't have the look, and we don't have the things, and we don't have the travel, and we don't have the whatever, that we don't have value? And let me tell you, if that's what you've decided about yourself, it's also what you've decided about the people that are around you in the world, even those you say you love the most. Because I guarantee you, if you're not valuing yourself internally, and seeing yourself through God's eyes, you're not seeing anyone else through God's eyes either. As I was putting this sermon together, I remembered a book called The Ethiopian Tattoo Shop. Don't be afraid. Although I was asking a young man the other day in a hospital room where he'd gotten his tattoos. I said, you know, I'm retiring, so... He was 17, and he looked at me. He said, well, I said, do you have a tattoo person that you like a lot? And he said, yes. Then he said, where are you thinking about getting a tattoo? I said, well, I was thinking about my forehead. He goes, they don't do that. It's a very nice young man. But this isn't about tattoos. Edward Hayes, who is the author, who is actually from Kansas, he wrote a parable many years ago called the old Folgers tin coffee can. Some of you will remember Folgers tin coffee cans. And there's a little boy who is playing down by a creek, and he's got a little toy boat, and he's pushing it along with a stick, and he wanders under a bridge, and under that bridge there's a little old man with a long white beard. And the little old man says, you seem like a very happy little boy. And the little boy says, I am happy. It's summer vacation. I don't have to go to school, and I can come down and play in the creek. And he looks at the little old man. He says, you seem very happy. And the old man says, I'm very, very happy. He says, do you want to know the secret to my happiness? And the little boy says, yes. And so the old man digs around in his knapsack, and he pulls out a tin Folgers coffee can. And he says, this is the answer to happiness. All you have to do is fill this can up to the brim, and you will be happy. And the little boy's ecstatic. He forgets about his boat. He forgets about the stick. He forgets about the bridge. He takes the Folgers coffee can, the magic Folgers coffee can, and he goes home, and he begins to put his favorite toys in it, and he stuffs them in, but it just seemingly won't fill to the brim. And as he goes through his life, he collects awards and good grades, and he's the president of his high school class, his senior class, and he stuffs all of those awards in there, and it doesn't work. It won't fill clear up to the brim. It fills a little bit. It won't fill up clear to the brim. And so he goes to college, and he's attractive, and he has many dates, and he's the quarterback of the football team, one who wins, which is odd yesterday. Anyway, And so he garners all of these accolades, and he has the internships at the best executive corporate offices, and he gets a job, and he marries a beautiful woman, and they have 3.2 wonderful children, and he stuffs all of that stuff in the magic, but it will never fill up, not even to the brim. And so he advances in his career, and finally he is an old man with white hair himself. And he makes the final merger that will in fact just guarantee that his family will be rich for every generation after him. And he shoves that final merger into that magic Folgers coffee can that sits now on the corner of its big desk, thinking, this will be it, this is the final. And it still didn't fill up, not to the brim. And so he takes it and he opens the window and he tosses the can. And it bangs around on the street, and it begins to make its way. It's a parable, it's a story. It begins to make its way down the highway, and it takes an exit ramp off into a little suburb. And it rolls all the way up and hits a curb and lands right in the middle of a yard where there's a little boy playing with his tractors and his balls, and his little dog is staying close to him, and he sees this can roll up beside him, and he picks it up. And he says, what an odd thing. And then he puts it up to his eyes, and this is what happens. He held the can skyward, and it became filled with the golden sun. He held it up toward a bird, and it was filled not only with the beauty of the creature, but with the lovely song as well. He filled it with his toys as they sat all in properness on their front lawns. He filled it with flowers and people, and running to a hallway mirror in his home, he filled it even with a picture of himself. With delight, he called out, "Oh, Mother, come quickly. A magic Folgers coffee can has just rolled into our yard. Come quickly, Mother. I'm the richest and happiest person in the world. The whole world, Mother. The whole world is now in my red magic Folgers coffee can." You see, what the man had not realized is that there wasn't a bottom in the can. And he left behind him a trail of all these accolades and all these awards and all this stuff that would never finally bring him that sense of intrinsic value. I'll end also with Anne Lamott's story about why the sermon is entitled, "I Has Value." It's hard for a grammarian to want that title, but she's teaching her Sunday school class. This is a true story. She's teaching her Sunday school class. It has 2 teenage boys, a younger boy, and a little girl who's too young yet to have braces, and she says she has wonderfully beautiful buck teeth. And she says, I'm giving the only really good Sunday school lesson I have, which is that they're all beloved children of God, and that they are wonderfully and fearfully made. And she says, we don't need to judge ourselves from the outside. She says, do you judge the sparrows in the sky and say, oh, look, that one has really let themselves go? And then she says, you have best friends. Does it make you love them less if they have acne or wear glasses? And then she says, what I want you to do is I want you to say aloud, I have value. Well, you can imagine how mortified those 2 teen boys were. But they did it because she asked them to. And then the younger boy, she said, well, you say that for me, please. And she said, because society and hormones hadn't ruined him yet, he said it as matter-of-factly as he did that he had ears. And then there was the little girl who was coloring and coloring. And so she went up to the little girl and she says, I want to hear you say that you have value. And the little girl looked up to her and she says, I has value. And Anne said to her, what? And she says, I has value. And Anne Lamott said, I finally understood it. I wanted to get that tattooed on my arm. Because that's what we each need to know, that we has value. Because God has made us so. So that's my challenge this week. Maybe find an old Folgers coffee can, if you have any around, and take a look at the sky through it, maybe even yourself. But more than that, don't be afraid to spiritually climb a tree. Don't be afraid to faithfully walk into a new land. Don't be afraid to claim that you are a person of intrinsic value. Amen.